I remember the afternoon light cutting across our kitchen tiles, painting pale gold lines through the half-drawn blind. My wife, Evelyn, leaned against the counter, a glass of iced tea sweating between her fingers, her expression carrying that calm, measured stillness she often wore before delivering news that would shift the ground beneath me. "Thomas," she began, voice smooth yet holding something unplaceable, "I've been thinking of taking a short holiday." I raised my brows, waiting for the usual, perhaps a visit to her sister in Vermont, or another spa weekend with her circle of college friends. Instead, her lips curled in a faint smile that seemed rehearsed. "I'd like to invite Claire," she said. The name struck like a dropped glass. I felt my chest tighten, though my face remained a mask. Claire, my assistant at the firm. Claire, whose laugh I had come to crave more than coffee in the morning. Claire, whose hand I had once held in the shadowed corner of a hotel lobby after too much wine. "You know Claire?" I asked, feigning casualness, though each syllable felt like pushing against heavy doors. "She came by last week," Evelyn replied, sipping slowly. "Dropped off some documents you'd forgotten." We spoke. "She's charming." Her eyes locked onto mine, steady, unblinking. My pulse drummed loud enough I thought it might echo in the quiet room. "What kind of trip?" I asked. "A coastal drive," she answered, turning toward the fridge, her movements deliberate. 3 days. Scenic. Relaxing. "You won't be coming. Your conference, remember?" I remembered. I also remembered how carefully Claire and I had kept things hidden, messages deleted, rendezvous disguised as working lunches. I remembered her perfume lingering on my shirt one evening, and how I had buried it in the laundry before Evelyn returned home. Now Evelyn wanted her alone. My mind spun with possible motives. Was this a trap? A test? Or something stranger? Curiosity, perhaps? Evelyn had always possessed a sharp, investigative nature. She could sniff out inconsistencies the way a hound scents game. "Claire will say yes," Evelyn continued, as if reading my thoughts. "I've already hinted." I swallowed hard, forcing a smile that felt too tight. "Sounds generous of you." "Generous," she echoed, her tone unreadable. Then she left the room, leaving the air heavy with something I couldn't name. When the front door closed behind her, I stood frozen. The late afternoon light shifted, shadows stretching longer across the floor. I imagined Evelyn and Claire, side by side, the wind whipping through the open windows of Evelyn's convertible, laughter spilling into the salt-heavy air. Somewhere between fear and fascination, a knot formed in my stomach. Whatever Evelyn had in mind, it would change everything. The following morning began under gray skies, clouds moving in slow procession over the rooftops beyond our bedroom window. I lay there longer than usual, staring upward, mind weaving scenarios I could neither fully believe nor dismiss. Evelyn's proposal still rang inside my head, each syllable sharp as fresh glass. Downstairs, I heard drawers sliding, cupboard doors closing. Her methodical rhythm suggested she had already begun assembling items for the journey. When I finally stepped into the kitchen, she stood at the counter, folding scarves into neat bundles. A small suitcase rested beside her, its leather worn yet polished, the same one she had carried during our honeymoon in Santorini. "Morning," she said, glancing briefly before returning to her task. I poured coffee, its steam curling upward like something escaping. "You're leaving tomorrow?" "Day after," she replied, tucking sunglasses into a side pocket. Claire confirmed. She sounded delighted. Her calmness unsettled me. I imagined the two of them conversing over the phone, Evelyn's voice measured, Claire's curious, perhaps nervous. Did she suspect anything? Or had Evelyn cloaked her invitation in such warmth that suspicion seemed impossible? Throughout the day, Evelyn moved through the house with quiet purpose, selecting dresses, checking maps, phoning a seaside inn. I found myself avoiding her gaze, afraid of what I might see there. Accusation, amusement, or worse, understanding. Later, in my office, I called Claire. The line connected, her voice carrying that familiar brightness I once found irresistible. "So, she told you?" Claire asked before I could speak. She told me, I answered. There was a pause, the faint sound of traffic through her receiver. I wasn't sure whether to accept, she said softly. But she sounded kind. Almost excited. You don't think this is strange? Of course it's strange, she replied, her tone edged with a nervous laugh. But maybe she just wants company. Company. The word felt like an understatement hiding something much larger. When evening came, Evelyn prepared dinner as though nothing in our lives had shifted: grilled salmon, lemon butter, roasted vegetables. We spoke about the weather, the neighbor's new fence, a book she had just finished. Not once did she mention Claire again, as if withholding the subject added weight to its presence. After clearing the dishes, she stepped onto the back porch, glass of wine in hand. I followed, standing beside her as the air cooled and night rose over the garden. She didn't look at me when she spoke, her eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the hedges. Some trips, she said, reveal more than photographs ever could. I wanted to ask what she meant, but the words stayed trapped behind my teeth. Dawn arrived draped in mist, streets glistening from a light rain during the night. I awoke before Evelyn's alarm, lying still while she moved around the room, footsteps muffled against the carpet. Zippers rasped softly as she closed her luggage. The faint scent of her perfume drifted through the air, carrying with it memories I would rather forget yet couldn't release. I descended to the kitchen, finding her already dressed, cream blouse, dark skirt, hair swept into a knot. She looked radiant, almost ceremonial, as though preparing for something momentous rather than casual travel. Claire's arrival was punctual. A knock at the front door, quick yet confident. When I opened it, she stood there in a navy trench coat, holding a small weekend bag, eyes flickering from me to the hallway behind. "Morning," she said. "Morning," I returned, stepping aside. Evelyn greeted her with warm familiarity, taking the bag, ushering her inside briefly before they departed. I noted the ease in Evelyn's smile, the way her hand brushed Claire's arm lightly, claiming territory without words. Claire seemed slightly tense, though she concealed it well, shoulders straight, voice steady when answering casual questions about the drive ahead. They didn't linger. Within minutes, both women stepped out toward the waiting convertible. I stood at the doorway, watching Evelyn place her bag in the back, then walk around to the driver's seat. Claire slid into the passenger side, adjusting her seatbelt, turning her face toward me just long enough for an unreadable glance. The engine started. Tires whispered over wet pavement as the car rolled down the street, roof folded back despite lingering clouds. Evelyn raised one hand in a brief wave without turning her head. I remained standing long after they disappeared from view, the sound of the engine fading into the hum of morning traffic. My house felt cavernous, walls echoing faintly with silence. Throughout the day, I tried immersing myself in work, yet my concentration fractured constantly. I pictured them on the highway, wind tossing hair, voices blending with the rush of air, perhaps sharing music, perhaps sharing glances weighted with meaning. Every imagined moment carried a double edge: fear of exposure, curiosity about Evelyn's intentions. By mid-afternoon, the sky cleared, revealing a hard, bright sunlight. I wandered into the living room, spotting a folded map Evelyn had left behind on the side table. Routes traced in red pen wound along the coast, dotted with circles marking stops, small towns, secluded beaches, scenic overlooks. My stomach twisted at the thought of the two of them standing together on some cliffside, ocean churning below, Evelyn's arm around Claire's shoulders. Night descended slowly, painting the house in long shadows. I reheated leftover pasta, ate without tasting, and returned to my desk. Every creak of the floorboards upstairs seemed louder than usual. I wondered if I would sleep at all. Morning sunlight streamed through half-open blinds, sharp beams cutting across my desk. I hadn't realized I'd fallen asleep there, head resting on folded arms, the faint ache in my neck announcing hours spent unmoving. Coffee brewed in the kitchen, while my phone buzzed against the wood. A text from Evelyn. "Stopped for breakfast. Weather's perfect. Claire says hello." Reading her words, I felt an odd chill despite the warmth filling the room. She had never before mentioned a travel companion in such a pointed way. The deliberate inclusion of Claire's greeting seemed like a signal, though its meaning eluded me. I typed a reply, brief, neutral, then set the phone down. 10 minutes later, another buzz. A photo this time. Evelyn and Claire seated at an outdoor cafe table, sunlight glinting off metal chairs, plates half filled with fruit and pastries. Evelyn leaned slightly toward Claire, whose smile appeared polite yet guarded. Both wore sunglasses, hiding eyes that might have told more. I enlarged the image, studying every detail, the distance between their shoulders, the tilt of Evelyn's head, the placement of her hand resting near Claire's coffee cup. Subtle, almost imperceptible, yet enough to stir questions that refused to settle. The day dragged forward. I attempted reading, attempted writing emails, but each attempt dissolved into imagining their conversations. Perhaps Evelyn asked about our late nights at the office, probing without accusation. Perhaps she recounted stories from our marriage, gauging reactions, searching for cracks. Mid-afternoon brought another message, short video this time. They stood on a windy overlook, ocean stretching vast and blue behind them. Evelyn's voice carried faintly over the gusts. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Claire nodded, hair whipping across her cheek. The camera lingered an extra second on her face before cutting off. I watched it repeatedly, each viewing drawing me deeper into speculation. Was Evelyn capturing memories or evidence? By evening, clouds gathered again, dark shapes crawling across the horizon. Rain began tapping against windows while I prepared dinner, the rhythmic sound amplifying the quiet within. My phone remained silent for hours until a final message arrived near midnight. "We found a little inn by the harbor. Room's lovely. Tomorrow we're exploring the old lighthouse." No mention of separate accommodations. No clarification. Just enough ambiguity to keep my thoughts spinning. Lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, hearing faint echoes of laughter that weren't real, ghosts of imagined moments between them. My mind swung between jealousy and dread, between guilt for what I'd done and unease over what Evelyn might now be doing. Sleep came in fragments, each broken by visions of moonlit harbors, shadowed corridors, and whispered conversations I couldn't quite hear. The next day began with an absence. No morning message, no photograph, no short greeting to anchor my thoughts. Hours passed beneath a heavy stillness, each minute stretching thin until it felt fragile enough to snap. I tried immersing myself in work, yet every attempt faltered. Numbers blurred on spreadsheets, sentences drifted apart mid-thought. My concentration dissolved entirely when the phone finally vibrated near noon. An email, not a text, from Evelyn. Visited the lighthouse. Claire climbed the stairs despite her fear of heights. Proud of her. The phrasing unsettled me. Not "we climbed together," but an emphasis on Claire's courage, as though Evelyn were documenting an accomplishment, recording details for someone else's understanding. Attached was another image. Claire leaning against a rusted railing, wind tangling her hair, waves churning far below. Evelyn's shadow stretched across the stone floor in the foreground, framing the shot. That shadow seemed more present than the person herself, silent, watchful, inescapable. I left my desk, pacing the hallway. Each creak underfoot reminded me how empty the house felt without Evelyn's measured footsteps or Claire's occasional laugh from the kitchen during late evenings last month. By mid-afternoon, another message arrived, this time a voicemail. Evelyn's tone held an unfamiliar softness when she said, "We're staying another night. Claire found a little bookstore by the harbor, thought of you when she saw the travel section. She's quite thoughtful." The pause before those last two words carried weight I couldn't ignore. My chest tightened. It was no longer clear whether Evelyn was simply gathering evidence or weaving her own connection to the woman I'd once believed belonged only to my secrecy. I remembered a dinner weeks earlier, Claire across from me at a dimly lit restaurant, her hand brushing mine under the table. I had felt certain then of my control over the situation. Now, control seemed like a memory, slipping further away with each mile of that coastal road. Evening shadows lengthened across the living room. I poured a drink, sitting in the armchair nearest the window, watching rain streak the glass. Lights from passing cars cast brief, wavering shapes on the walls, reminding me of headlights sweeping over an unfamiliar motel room, two silhouettes leaning close, their outlines merging. The phone stayed silent until late. One final message arrived just as I considered calling to demand an explanation. Claire says she's never laughed this much in years. You were right, she's wonderful company. There it was again, the deliberate mention of Claire's voice, her words, her approval. My hands tightened around the glass until I feared it might shatter. Somewhere inside the uncertainty, I realized this trip was no longer about testing me. It was becoming something entirely different, and I might already be too late to stop it. The convertible pulled into the driveway under a bright afternoon sky, sunlight flashing across its polished surface. I stood at the window, heart pacing unevenly as I watched them climb out, their movements synchronized in a way that suggested familiarity grown over shared days. Evelyn stepped forward carrying her bag, face lit with an expression I hadn't seen in months. Open, unguarded, alive. Claire followed, smiling faintly, her gaze flicking toward me through the glass before shifting away. I opened the door. Warm air swept inside along with the scent of salt and distant rain. Evelyn kissed my cheek lightly, almost perfunctory, then brushed past toward the hallway. Claire lingered, clutching her small bag as though it contained something fragile. "Thank you for letting her take me," she said, voice careful. I studied her face, searching for signs, guilt, joy, secrecy. I found only calm, a stillness that unsettled me more than any flustered denial might have. Evelyn called from the kitchen, "Thomas, could you help with the wine?" I followed her in, noting how easily she moved, how little tension clung to her gestures. She opened a bottle, poured 2 glasses, one for me, one for herself, and raised hers slightly. "To truth," she said. The word landed heavy. I sipped, tasting something sharper than expected. She leaned against the counter, eyes steady on mine. "I wanted to understand her," she continued. "Not through suspicion, not through your version, but my own. And I do now." I waited for accusation, for anger, but none came. Instead, she smiled, small, almost sad. "Claire and I talked," she said. "About you. About us. About what's been missing here for a long time." I opened my mouth, but she held up a hand. "Don't explain. I'm not here to punish. I'm here to decide." Footsteps behind me, Claire entering quietly, setting her bag down. She looked between us, an unspoken understanding passing in that brief exchange. Evelyn set her glass aside. We could keep circling this, pretending nothing's changed. Or we could acknowledge that something has. Her words hung in the stillness. Outside, a bird called from somewhere beyond the garden, its sound distant yet clear. Claire shifted, speaking softly. "Whatever happens, I never meant to hurt either of you." I looked at her, then at Evelyn, feeling the shape of my life bending toward an outcome I hadn't imagined when this began. Evelyn's voice was calm, almost gentle. "I'm taking some time. Alone. Think of it as my trip, this time without anyone else." She moved toward the door, gathering her coat, leaving the wine half-finished. Claire glanced at me once more before following her outside. The sound of the convertible faded down the street, leaving the house quiet except for the ticking of the clock. I stood there, holding my glass, tasting the last drop, wondering if truth had ever been what I truly wanted.